You know all those things your body just does without you even thinking about it? Your heart's beating, you're breathing, you're digesting food, all of it happens automatically. So today, we're going to dive into that hidden control system and talk about what happens when its wiring gets a little crossed.
So, what is that system running the show behind the scenes? Well, it's the master controller for basically every function you never have to consciously think about. And we're about to pull back the curtain and demystify it.
The easiest way to wrap your head around this system, which is called the autonomic nervous system, or ANS, is to think of it as your body's own incredibly sophisticated autopilot. It's designed to keep everything running smoothly without you ever having to grab the controls.
Now, this autopilot has two main modes. First, you've got the sympathetic system. This is your fight or flight response. Think of it like the emergency manual override, the thing that kicks in when you need a sudden jolt of adrenaline. And then, on the flip side, you have the parasympathetic system. That's your rest and digest mode. This is all about smooth cruising, recovery, and just routine maintenance.
Sounds like a pretty perfectly balanced system, right? But what happens when that autopilot starts to glitch? You know, when the signals get mixed up and those automatic responses just aren't reliable anymore. Well, that's when we enter the world of autonomic dysfunction.
The official term for this is dysautonomia, and it's really just a broad term for when that autopilot, the ANS, isn't regulating things the way it should. Maybe fight or flight kicks in at the wrong moment, or rest and digest completely overreacts. The whole system is just out of sync.
So, what does a malfunctioning autopilot actually feel like? Well, it's not just some technical problem. It has very real, very physical consequences. People can experience this whole range of confusing symptoms, things like dizziness, a racing heart, fainting, major fatigue, even weird issues with sweating and not being able to handle heat or cold. It's the body's most basic functions going completely haywire.
Dysautonomia isn't just one single condition. It's more of an umbrella term that covers a lot of different things. So to make this a little clearer, we're going to look at 4 very distinct examples, 4 different ways this autopilot can glitch out.
First up is POTS. You might have actually heard about this one recently. It's getting a lot more recognition, especially as something that can show up after viral infections, like COVID-19.
POTS is a perfect example of the autopilot failing at a super simple task. When a person with POTS just stands up, their ANS doesn't properly squeeze the blood vessels to fight gravity. So, to compensate and get blood up to the brain, the heart just starts racing. And that's what leads to the crazy high heart rate, the dizziness, and that crushing fatigue. Okay, next up is a condition you might have seen, or heck, even experienced yourself without knowing the technical name: Vasovagal Syncope. To put it simply, this is the common faint.
What's happening here is the rest and digest system goes into total overdrive. Some kind of trigger, like the sight of blood or even just intense emotional stress, causes the parasympathetic system to just slam on the brakes. Your heart rate and blood pressure plummet so fast that you faint. It's a massive, dramatic overreaction.
Now, this next glitch is one you can actually see. It's an exaggerated response to cold or stress, where the ANS triggers an extreme lockdown on blood vessels. We're talking about Raynaud's phenomenon.
With Raynaud's, the autopilot's control over blood vessels just goes completely rogue. When it gets cold, the ANS triggers this extreme reaction, clamping down on the blood vessels so tightly that blood flow gets cut off, which is why fingers and toes can turn that startling white or blue color.
And finally, we have a much more severe condition where the body's own immune system gets involved: Guillain-Barré Syndrome. In this case, the autopilot system itself comes under direct attack.
So, unlike the others, this starts as an autoimmune condition where the body attacks its own nerves. And when those attacks target the autonomic nerves, the autopilot itself gets damaged. This can lead to really dangerous swings in blood pressure and heart rhythm that need immediate medical attention.
Okay, so let's just pull all that together. This table sums up those 4 different glitches really nicely. And you can see how wild it is, right? Dysautonomia can show up in completely opposite ways, like the heart rate speeding up in POTS versus suddenly crashing in syncope. It just goes to show how one system malfunctioning can cause this huge variety of problems, from blood flow issues to a full-blown autoimmune crisis.
All right, I know that was a lot of pretty complex names, so how are you supposed to keep them all straight? Well, don't worry, let's run through a quick little cheat sheet to help make these terms stick.
For POTS, the clue is literally in the name: Postural Orthostatic Tachycardia Syndrome. Just remember, your posture triggers tachycardia,
which is just a fancy word for a rapid heart rate. Simple.
For vasovagal syncope, the key is the vagus nerve, which is a huge part of that rest and digest system. So just think, the vagus nerve overreacts to a trigger, and that's what causes the faint.
Okay, this one's a little bit sillier, but hey, if it works, it works. For Raynaud, just picture someone named Ray whose nose gets super cold, just like the fingers and toes affected by the condition. Ray nose is cold.
And for Guillain-Barré, or GB syndrome, the memory aid actually describes how it typically progresses. The weakness often starts in the feet and legs and moves up toward the head. So just think ground to brain.
So we've defined the autopilot, we've looked at its glitches, and we've even got some tricks to remember them. But what's the big takeaway here? Why does understanding all of this really matter?
And it really comes down to this. Conditions like these are so often invisible. A person can look perfectly fine, totally healthy on the outside, while their internal autopilot is an absolute chaos. So understanding the mechanics of dysautonomia, well, it helps us make these very real but often hidden struggles finally visible.
So I'll leave you with this to think about. When we take the time to learn about these systems that are running just beneath the surface, how does that change our whole perception of what it means to be healthy? And maybe more importantly, how does it change how we treat people whose struggles we can't immediately see?